Good morning, Douglas Namle, Disaster Recovery Officer with the county. Appreciate the communication and ongoing collaboration with council and many of the leaders in our community who are, charging the way around recovery from the 2018 eruption. Given the breadth of the topics in the communication, I will try to cover them all and kind of be succinct, but happy to have broader conversation. I think the first piece, really in terms of our ongoing work with the Disaster Recovery Task Force, this is a body that was convened in December that has members of the council, kind of county leadership, as well as members of the community who are working through, as some of the testifiers really described, complicated issues to kind of get direction. We've been meeting regularly, and over the past, after initial kickoff meeting, we've met to cover some preliminary review of the draft Kilauea recovery plan. We've spent time to really work through considerations, data points, impacts related to road restoration. We have met with HVO, actually, a briefing on the reality of temperatures and cooling following this eruption and what folks can expect in terms of the areas that were inundated. And most recently kind of also met about the components and design of a voluntary buyout program. Really, it's a national model that we have flexibility to adapt to meet our immediate needs and our priorities. And so that was a really helpful, robust conversation that also happened in this current moment of social distancing. So it was a number of focused virtual conversations. And most recently kind of getting feedback on the Kilauea Recovery and Resilience Plan, which I'll talk about in a minute. I know one of the big sets of decisions that has been really critical to people's lives and livelihoods in Lower Puna who've been affected by the eruption is decisions on road restoration. With Department of Public Works and Finance and kind of our nascent team, work has been put in, and earlier this spring we were able to come to agreement on a dollar value for the restoration of the county roads that were inundated by the eruption. The total dollar value is $82 million. That represents a 75% grant on the federal side of $61 million, and local match 25% of $21 million. The way that the FEMA funds work is reimbursement based. So while we have this obligation and we have the access to the dollars, like with any FEMA funding, time immemorial, a jurisdiction does the work and then gets reimbursed for it after the fact. One of the key pieces to be able to move forward is to make and articulate decisions related to what infrastructure that was damaged and was part of this grant agreement will be restored. FEMA has paths kind of really to be adaptive to enable local communities to recover around restoring the infrastructure, identifying an alternative project, and this 428 program also provides for alternative projects with any excess funds. Really coming out of the deliberation with the task force, which really weighed the complex decisions related with each road restoration, understanding the geological conditions that now exist today following the eruption, conditions that will change as we've seen over time from previous eruptions. We're prepared to kind of announce some decisions around road restoration. The first decision is around Leilani Avenue. So quite an extent of Leilani Avenue is inundated, and we are kind of moving forward with restoration of the extent of Leilani Avenue that connects to Pohoiki Road and Kahukai Street. And this will provide access to Ekipuka and Leilani estates, where there are kind of several homes, parcels, and some farming as well. We do not advise and do not plan to restore the rest of Leilani Avenue, and part of this decision has been conversations with the community and Leilani estates. We do plan to restore the 900 feet of Lighthouse Road that was inundated at Four Corners. It's been clear that access to that shoreline, even prior to the eruption, was really important to the community. Open space is important to the community, and since the eruption, the area has changed so much as well. We think restoring Lighthouse Road is important as a decision, but we also know that we need to come together, Lino descendants, property owners, engage community members working with the county and the state to understand what the management of that area of Kumukahi, its significance, the sensitivity at the area around natural and cultural resources. It's got to work together. I think restoring Lighthouse Road is a first step to that. But there's still a lot of work that we have to come together around in terms of public access and management for that area. Yes, short is Lighthouse Road. We are looking to restore. For Highway 137, we're prepared to restore the extent of Highway 137 that abuts the Vacation Land and Kapoho subdivisions. The community has made clear that they have plans to restore their private road network and kind of have folks who choose to restore their homes and farms there to be able to return. We're ready to work with them on kind of being able to provide that county road access. And on the other end of 137, the temporary extent, at Opikau, where right after the eruption we were able to provide access to Isaac Hale Beach Park from 130. We feel it's important that we restore that to a more permanent standard as part of this work. I think it's clear from community conversations, including this morning, and testimony from members of the public, that there is ongoing concern about not restoring the full extent of 137 that was inundated by the eruption. I think if these decisions are where we are right now, and I want to continue to kind of lift up the priorities and concerns folks are raising. I think more on that, just in light of these decisions. But I think for these decisions on restoration and the roads that we are not restoring, which also includes the roads that service the Lanipuna Gardens area, Hinalo, Laone, Honu'ula, really we considered strongly community input, kind of desire and direction from impacted residents wanting to return for farming or for living, and also the geological conditions and the kind of the hazard areas too, kind of for future eruptions. The task force provided a lot of input in terms of weighing all these considerations. There's no question about, for folks who continue to prioritize the restoration of all of 137, that is a priority. I think where we need to work is helping everyone understand where we are in terms of that decision not to restore that extent, kind of what the balance of those inputs are into that decision. I think to close out on roads, I know timelines are really critical, and in kind of questions about kind of how each project can move forward, with Po'iki, which has been articulated as the next priority for restoration, the county is ready to go. We're waiting to just get confirmation from FEMA on the notice to proceed to be able to start work there. For each of these other road segments, and this applies to any kind of FEMA-funded infrastructure projects, we have to kind of cross different milestones to be able to get to construction ready. This includes obviously kind of looking at these road segments in terms of final cost and scope and confirming that with FEMA relative to the full scopes that were initially submitted for the grant agreement. This also includes completing permitting and right-of-ways on the county side. Right-of-entries, my apologies, on the county side, and working with FEMA on environmental historic preservation review. Several of these can work simultaneously on the county and on the FEMA side. So the decision, much like Po'iki, the decision to restore these additional road segments really lies with our team in collaboration within the county hui of folks involved in recovery, and with ongoing consultation with members of the community. With each road project, it's a project in and of itself. It has a scope of work, it has a timeline. What we're focused on is being able to articulate those milestones that get us to a construction start and articulating what that timeline is from the construction start. I think we experienced it with 132 that the clarity was very important to the community and to within the county family as well. When there was a road bump like heat, we were clear about that. And so in terms of process and how we want to move forward, we want to continue looking at 132 as the way we do it. But each kind of road segment that I've just explained will have kind of its timeline that we'll work to articulate as those milestones become clear. I think with Po'iki Road, while we are waiting for the notice to proceed from FEMA on this specific project, just in consultation with DPW, the full completion of the project could take as much as a year. We'll think about and plan for efficiencies and whatnot, but to give a context to timelines and what it takes to mobilize and complete these projects, I think it is really key along that timeline to be communicative about where we are and where we're going. around those ends.
Douglas, could you clarify real quick? You talked about each project taking about a year, given the process.
Yeah, no, so that was only specific to Pohoiki Road.
Okay.
So where we were most advanced along the way. We don't have a timeline in terms of duration or start finish for these other projects that I've identified today, but we will get there.
And you'll be working on projects in parallel to one another.
There's a lot of benefit to efficiency in terms of mobilization of resources, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. On the additional kind of federal funding front, Parks and Recreation has been working along with the same timeline with all the other agencies around their own public assistance grant. And currently, for the damages or lost assets at Isaac Hala Beach Park and Ahalanui Beach Park, Parks and Recreation is still negotiating kind of the final kind of dollar value cost estimation. I think we've covered this in the past, and I think it continues to be an issue. Working within the FEMA system and its process for cost estimation, its affirmation for independent review with the Army Corps for larger projects, and the realities of construction on our island, as well as the realities of working with lava. And the models aren't necessarily built for lava; they're built for other types of disaster events that the rest of the country faces more frequently. This has been one part of this process, right? Understanding and getting to final agreement and eventual obligation around funding for Parks and Recreation's assets. I think a really exciting and important milestone is the initiation of a public comment period for the disaster recovery block grant funding that HUD is providing, the $83.8 million that has been allocated to the county. We expect to kind of finalize a draft for public comment at the end of this month to open up a 30-day public comment period. And after that comment period is closed, to kind of synthesize, categorize and respond to comments, and including any updates to the plan that are driven by the comments. Our deadline to submit this action plan to HUD is August 31st, and we anticipate, with the timing of the public comment period, to be able to meet that deadline in good time. I think a lot of folks are curious about what the HUD action plan is, right? And it is the requirement that's specified to the HUD funding. What HUD requires and what we will include planning coordination, community engagement efforts, what they call a citizen participation plan. How during the life cycle of the grant, we as a jurisdiction will be working with the community around changes and communication. We have to provide demographic and market information really for the disaster impacted area. Part of this is around satisfying HUD's mission around ensuring fair housing, right? So understanding who is in our community, what the housing market looks like, and any analysis of impacts to impediments to fair housing. We have to quantify our recovery needs to date, including any resources and that have been provided to the county, and also identify projects. So what specific projects are we talking about? A voluntary residential buyout program being key to it, and how it shapes national objectives, which is a HUD term. And finally, it includes a pre-award implementation plan. So what are the operational and capacity aspects the county's put in place to be able to implement the grant successfully? So folks can look out for that when we're prepared to put out the document. Like any jurisdiction, all action plans are public, and so if folks want to see how other jurisdictions do it, we do that research too around best practices. A lot of this is publicly available for other people's action plans that have been adopted. Really key milestones we're also working through are the Kilauea Recovery and Resilience Plan, which aims to kind of chart a course for our recovery across the board with all the, across all sectors. Really, the vision is to build resilient communities in the impacted area, thinking about and kind of really lifting up INA, land management, supporting community recovery from the 2018 eruption, building capacity to mitigate against future disaster events, and reducing risk to life and property, and prioritizing economic opportunity and well-being for residents. That's our broader vision, our near-term, long-term goals in the plan. Near-term, really to facilitate projects and efforts that provide that immediate relief that for needs that are ongoing for residents and businesses impacted by the eruption. The long-term goal is to really look at strategies, policies, projects that protect public health and safety in light of volcanic hazards, enhances community well-being, and kind of helps to create a more resilient economy following this eruption event. The strategies really boil down to eruption recovery, thinking about disaster resilience, so building capacity on the operational side, community planning, disaster preparedness, and then the final strategy focuses on community development. So where do we need to build networks and capacity within the community to invest in targeted revitalizations in Puna to support disaster resilience and economic growth, and also to kind of carry and identify areas for natural cultural resources management and opportunities for economic or agricultural development. The disaster economic recovery plan is more focused on the economic sector. Really, this plan, its goal is to have a roadmap for job creation and facilitating public-private investment. Much like the Recovery and Resilience Plan, it's structured around, a vision, strategies, and projects associated with strategies. And at a very high level, the strategies include a commitment to kind of a place-based economy that really honors our natural cultural resources, really building workforce development opportunities at different scales and in different ways. There are resources and programs out there. How can we do differently or expand in light of this volcanic eruption, but also to meet broader community needs around workforce development, to enhance kind of economic and entrepreneurship support system on our island, to identify critical infrastructure that supports economic development and facilitates private investment, building financial capability at like a household and entrepreneurship level, and thinking about kind of managing risks. So how does the economic kind of ecosystem and business sector work with government to kind of think about managing future risks? So this is the really what the plans are putting forth. We're taking the next couple of weeks to finalize it. Before public comment, before public release, and just want to give some context of where we are and where we're going in terms of these both of these recovery plans, which I think will be very central. And finally, to provide an update to the work of Neighborhood Place of Puna and their administration with the county of the disaster case management program. The staff at Neighborhood Place of Puna have been kind of up and running since September. They have reached out to over 1,500 disaster-impacted individuals to really assess what their recovery needs are. The program works kind of twofold, where the grant from FEMA provides the resources to bring Neighborhood Place of Puna and their case managers on board to provide that direct assistance to survivors from the eruption. And then the Kilauea Hui, that's made up of several nonprofits that are leveraging kind of their funding and philanthropic dollars to provide immediate assistance to these households. The folks that we've been serving through Neighborhood Place of Puna are people who really have a lot of unmet needs relative to their recovery. About 205 individuals have completed the full intake and needs assessment process after outreach. We've had as many as 165 individuals complete full recovery plans, and of that, 106 remain active. So, cases that we continue to work through. In total, across the board, we've been able to make 723 referrals to other services beyond the support that Neighborhood Place of Puna provides. And through the really coordinated effort with Kilauea Hui, over $320,000 has gone directly to disaster survivors. That has been going to meet the most immediate unmet needs, which is really folks looking for stable housing, reconstruction of their housing, and also repairs to building systems like catchment systems. And so really Neighborhood Place of Puna brings these cases to Kilauea Hui, and they have a kind of two-handed partner-based process of allocating this funding to these survivors. I think also very important for families who went through the FEMA Individual Assistance Program, the advocacy that Neighborhood Place of Puna has done on behalf of families has also netted an additional $49,000 of individual assistance post what was originally granted by FEMA. So these are all kind of real benefits, and in the work that Neighborhood Place of Puna continues to do, month by month with Kilauea Hui, additional folks are being served. The funding for Kilauea for Neighborhood Place of Puna through the disaster case management program is initially was set to expire in May, basically essentially 2 years after the start of the eruption with the federal disaster declaration. This is how much of the FEMA funding programs flow. Just automatically 2 years, and extensions based on program need or different channels. So up until this point, just given the need for the ongoing work, We are continuing to work through the current date of August. But just last week, we submitted an additional extension to be able to provide additional time for us to spend down the funding we have available to us and continue to provide the services that are needed. This helps to bridge the time to deploy additional recovery resources for families, like the buyout program. But this request falls within a larger authority that FEMA provided all of its grantees in terms of related impacts to COVID. So, there's no question that for some families that were doing okay within the Neighborhood Place of Puna program, the effects of the COVID pandemic and the impacts on the economy have really impacted them too, right? And so that's one of the recognitions. But also so much of this work relies on the actual activities of the nonprofits at Neighborhood Place of Puna and those that are involved in Kilauea Hui. They've also had impacts related to the downturn and the pandemic. And so the request for additional time of 6 months has been submitted, and we're looking forward to getting an affirmative from FEMA on that so we can continue the work. And finally, we were excited yesterday to announce the opening of the Kilauea Recovery Grants Program. This was the funding that the council was able to move forward with Bill 146, Ordinance 2020-28. All the information is available on the Kilauea Recovery website, recovery.hawaiicounty.gov, application forms, instructions, and also our staff are here to help people navigate the process. We've already gotten questions back just over the last day, which is exciting to see given the interest for accessing these grants. The grants really will go to support the recovery and repairs from the physical damage of the eruption. And the deadline to submit applications is July 24th. Details will be there, and please, folks in the community should not hesitate to reach out to us kind of with questions. And finally, I think for some time we've been working on the Puna Strong Grants Program. We finalized the RFP for the program and preparing to release the request for proposals to seek a not-for-profit partner with relevant experience to work with the county to design and administer this Puna Strong Grants Program. And so that's the next milestone, is just kind of getting to the release of that request for proposals. I hope that kind of painted the full picture, and happy to have take any questions or have a broader conversation with members of the council.